Joining me each Thursday is Nationals frontbencher Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby Joyce, I know you were there in the room for that speech. Jacinta Price's speech today, what should we take out from it?
Well, it was a masterclass, and I think that Jacinta has the capacity to say the things that so many other people want to say, but we feel unable to say it because we would be cast as a racist if we did. But it's not racism, it's logic. Jacinta clearly stated that she wants an Australian where all Australians are seen as equivalent. And isn't that something that we all want? We don't want to be disparaged because we have the temerity to say, I don't want to be classed by the colour of my skin. I want you to judge me as to who I am. And I think one of the most powerful parts is where Jacinta said that Australia reaches success when it doesn't need a Department of Indigenous Aboriginal Affairs, and it certainly doesn't need an enshrined position in the Constitution, because we will have reached our goal, which is all people treated with equivalence. And what this voice referendum does, it says we will enshrine in perpetuity that there will always be a difference, there will always be a disparity, there will always be an inability of the Australian people to reconcile the things that need to be resolved between people of remote areas. And she said quite clearly, it's not an Aboriginal white thing, it's a remote area urban thing. And in remote areas, they're not just Aboriginal people, but Asian people, Indian people, Caucasian people, all types of people. And that's why her speech, and it was marvellous. It was marvellous. It was so good to be able to sit and listen to it in the front row. It will go down in Australia's history as a totemic moment of politics.
No, I agree with you completely. That's why I played longer excerpts from it than I normally would for a speech. I think it's important that Australians hear from themselves what we're talking about. Now, Barnaby, I started this week by saying that the voice is dead. It's even deader now, if that could be, after the public has heard the abuse from Marsha Langton, you racist, and the vision today from Jacinta Price. The Prime Minister, maybe because of this, was very emotional today, welcoming former footballer Michael Long, who'd walked from Melbourne to Canberra to push for the voice. Here he is.
This is a hand outstretched, asking for the hand to be joined. That's all it is. Who in Australia, when a hand goes out, dismisses it and doesn't shake?
But Barnaby Joyce, I don't think this is really what the thing is about, shaking hands. But I do think it does raise this question for both parties, for every Australian really, after the referendum. There will be no voice. So what do you think should be then done to close the gap?
Well, both parties are saying, one loudly, one quietly, about the October the 15th tactic, because I want Australia to move on as quickly as possible. And the political pundits and the apparatchiks realise that October the 15th is the day that we move on to the next issue. And like the Prime Minister, I see Michael Long in the gallery. I've got an immense respect for Michael Long. As a footballer, I believe 100% that he does everything that he believes is right, and as does Nicky Winmar, as does Jonathan Thurston. I had the privilege of playing a game of footy with Mal Meninga. So, you know, we all feel really awkward and angry about the position we've all been put in, that we have to make statements against people who are our mates. And that's why we get so angry about this. It's divisive. It's divided our nation up, and we didn't want to be divided up. After this is finished, concluded, we go on with the task of making sure that people in remote areas, in regional areas, in Indigenous areas are looked after. And we do that to the ultimate of our being, the ultimate of our political capacity. But we do that on the circumstances in which they find themselves in, not on the colour of their skin, We don't just start dividing
I think
this
that's right.
place into something based on race. That's anathema to what Australia is about.
Barnaby Joyce, just finally, away from this, Defence Minister Richard Marles, he is still refusing to commit to releasing details to a Senate inquiry of how he spent $3.6 million flying around on the RAAF VIP flight series.
Will you be releasing details of where you've spent the $3.6 million to the Senate?
We're keen, as we always have been, to release as much information as possible within the bounds of the national security advice.
Will you release that information, or will the advice give you cover not to release all that information?
We will release as much information as we can within the bounds of the national security advice.
Well, in fact, the Defence Minister has written that he can't release that kind of information because of the evolving threats. You can't reveal the patterns of travel of politicians, their families and staff that adversaries could use. Do you buy that?
I would say to Richard Marles, there is one person on God's good earth who believes you, Richard, and that is your mother. Not even you believe what you just said. And this crazy kind of dodgy approach, you've been called on it, Richard. You've been busted on it, mate. Just fess up. Tell people the truth, because the more you go down this path, Richard, the more ridiculous you look. And right now, you look totally and utterly ridiculous.
Well, I think people do want a little bit more accountability for that $3.6 million, some of which was used to fly the Defence Minister to watch a couple of games of the Matildas in Sydney, which doesn't strike me as critical to his defence responsibilities. But there you go. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time.